Before roads, before wheels, before horses were ever ridden, humans were already walking across entire continents. No maps, no compasses, no idea what was on the other side of that mountain range or that stretch of open water. Just curiosity, hunger, and two legs. So how did a handful of people in Africa end up, tens of thousands of years later, standing on every continent on Earth except Antarctica? The answer is one of the longest, slowest journeys any species has ever taken. And it didn't happen because anyone planned it. It starts around 300,000 years ago in Africa, where Homo sapiens first show up in the fossil record. For a long time, we stayed put. Africa had everything early humans needed: a huge range of climates, abundant food, and enough space that there was no real pressure to leave. But populations grow, droughts happen, and prey animals move. So around 70,000 to 100,000 years ago, small groups started pushing out of the continent, likely following coastlines and river valleys, where food was predictable and water was never far away. These weren't organized expeditions. They were probably just a few dozen people at a time, moving a little further each generation in search of the next reliable water source. One of the earliest and most successful routes wasn't through open desert or thick jungle. It was the coast. Shellfish, fish, crabs, and stranded sea life gave a steady, low-risk food source that didn't require chasing down large animals. So bands of humans slowly worked their way along the shorelines of the Arabian Peninsula and into South Asia, rarely straying far from the water. Some researchers call this the coastal highway theory, the idea that the fastest way to cross a continent wasn't through its center, but around its edges. From South Asia, humans pushed further east and north, adapting to completely new climates, dense forests, high plateaus, freezing winters they'd never experienced in Africa. Along the way, they weren't alone. In parts of Asia, Homo sapiens crossed paths with another ancient human relative, the Denisovans, a mysterious group known mostly from a handful of bone fragments and DNA, rather than complete skeletons. Like with the Neanderthals later on, there was contact, and again, interbreeding, leaving small traces of Denisovan DNA in some populations living in Asia and the Pacific today. Getting to Australia meant crossing open ocean, even at the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age, when far more land was exposed than today. There was no land bridge the whole way. Around 65,000 years ago, humans made multiple sea crossings, likely using simple rafts or dugout boats, some stretches over 70 kilometers with no land in sight. No way to know for certain there was even anything on the other side. It's considered one of the earliest known instances of deliberate, planned seafaring in human history, meaning this wasn't an accident. Someone, or some group, decided the ocean was worth the risk. Meanwhile, other groups moved north into Europe around 45,000 years ago, encountering an entirely different human species already living there, the Neanderthals, who had thrived in Europe's cold climates for hundreds of thousands of years already. The two groups coexisted for thousands of years, sometimes clashed, and sometimes interbred, before Neanderthals eventually disappeared from the fossil record, leaving behind traces of their DNA that still show up in humans today, especially outside of Africa. Further east, once humans reached the Pacific coastlines of Asia, some kept going, hopping between islands using increasingly sophisticated outrigger canoes, reading ocean swells, star positions, and bird flight patterns to find land they couldn't yet see. This much later wave of Pacific migration eventually reached islands as remote as Hawaii, Tahiti, and Easter Island, some of the last habitable places on Earth to be settled by humans, all without a single written map. The last great migration into a brand new continent came through the far north. During the last ice age, sea levels dropped low enough to expose a wide strip of land connecting Siberia to Alaska, a region known as Beringia. Around 20,000 years ago, or possibly earlier, small groups crossed this frozen bridge, following herds of mammoths, bison, and other game, unknowingly becoming the first humans to ever set foot in the Americas. It wasn't a single crossing. It was likely small groups moving back and forth over generations, some settling, some turning back, until enough people had moved through. Once in the Americas, humans spread astonishingly fast, from Alaska down through North America, Central America, and all the way to the southern tip of South America, a journey of over 15,000 kilometers in just a few thousand years. Along the way, they adapted to nearly every environment the continents had to offer: deserts, dense rainforests, high-altitude mountains, and freezing southern plains, developing entirely new tools, hunting strategies, and ways of life suited to each new landscape. No ships with sails, no wheels, no writing to pass down directions, just walking, watching the coastlines, following the animals, reading the stars, and going a little further than the generation before. In roughly 60,000 years, humans went from a single region in Africa to literally every habitable continent on Earth. Not bad for a species with no GPS, no compass, and no idea where any of it was going to lead.